Assalamu alaikum boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all ages, bringing it back to you guys with another Muslim Brothers 101 video. So, you might be asking why I am down here on the floor. That's because I've got a whiteboard here, and I don't have any stands for the whiteboard, okay? So this is the equipment we're working with right now. And also this is an Islamic video. One of my friends gave me a really good idea, Zen Nakvi. He said that, spreading any kind of knowledge, especially good knowledge, is always going to be good deeds, it's good sawab, it's good rewards. And that's basically the main reason why I made Muslim Brothers 101, was to spread some good knowledge. And alhamdulillah, I'm studying medicine right now, so I thought, you know what, I could use the channel to maybe clear a few concepts that maybe I didn't understand back, or something like that. And then, that's also spreading good knowledge too. So, okay, so we're starting with, if you can see up here, it says basal ganglia pathways. When I was studying neuroanatomy, a lot of it was memorization for me because I wasn't really able to understand it. No one really taught it very well. And because of that, I didn't like neuroanatomy. It always felt like everything's just, so like unreal, I feel like. I just couldn't really understand what was going on and where all this was happening. So, inshallah, the main purpose of this is to make you guys actually enjoy neuroanatomy. Some of the pathways and stuff that I memorized, I want you guys to actually understand them and enjoy this. So let's get started with it. This is a tester video, I guess. This is the first video. Obviously, inshallah, if these videos start popping up, I'm actually on my knees right now. And then we can start investing in some equipment. So, I hope you guys can see me here, and I hope you can see what the words say. Oh, I'm standing in front of a lot of words. Okay, when we get to this part, I'll move over there. So basal ganglia pathways, we know there's a direct pathway and an indirect pathway. Okay? Everybody keeps talking about that. But what does it mean? What does it do? And these neurotransmitters also, the neurotransmitters are in red, okay? And the brain pathway, or the brain parts, are in blue, okay? So let's start with this. So first of all, basal ganglia pathways, what are the basal ganglia? Parts of the brain that essentially they initiate motor movements, okay? They'll start motor movements. That's basically what they do. Let's just keep it at that. They start motor movements, okay? Now, they've got the globus pallidus, the subthalamic nuclei, globus pallidus, internal, external, and the substantia nigra over here. And these all just sound like words, really. They don't make much sense, do they? But inshallah, after this, they will. Okay. First of all, something very important we have to learn is over here. The word disinhibition. Wow, you guys can't even see that, I don't think. Disinhibition is when you inhibit an inhibitor. Okay? So when you inhibit an inhibitor, you're basically causing excitation because you're stopping the inhibitor from doing its job. Okay? So when we study this pathway, we're going to first forget dopamine and acetylcholine. It's got nothing to do with it right now. GABA and glutamate, okay? We've got GABA and glutamate. These two we're going to focus on, the G's. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and glutamate in the CNS is always excitatory, okay? Those are just some rules. I remember I got an MCQ once. So remember, glutamate is excitatory and GABA is inhibitory, okay? Alright, so when you inhibit an inhibitor, it's called disinhibition, and that's a main mechanism of how the basal ganglia works, because when you stop the inhibitor from doing its job, you're basically getting excitation indirectly, okay? Alright, so you want to move, okay, you want to start a motor movement, come from the cortex to the striatum. What is the striatum? The striatum basically is just the caudate nucleus and the putamen. Okay, these are just parts of the basal ganglia, just remember the words. They don't really mean much. You can see what they look like on an image, maybe a CT scan. But the caudate and the putamen come together to form the striatum, okay? The striatum is where everything's going to start from. Okay, forget the acetylcholine right now, okay? Okay, let's talk about the indirect, let's talk about the direct pathway first. So the striatum, this is that indirect pathway from here towards the right, okay? Or is this your left? I don't know. And downwards is going to be the direct pathway. Okay, so the striatum releases GABA to the globus pallidus, okay? Internal, external, forget that for now. Striatum releases GABA, and basically we said GABA was inhibitory, so striatum is inhibiting the globus pallidus. Okay, good enough, makes sense. Globus pallidus will then release GABA, which inhibits thalamus, okay? Right. Someone was at the door, I'll have to cut the video there. Okay, so we were talking about how globus pallidus will release GABA and inhibit, because GABA is inhibitory, the thalamus. Okay? Now through the direct pathway, if you think about it, at the mechanism of disinhibition, striatum inhibits globus pallidus, which inhibits thalamus. So when you inhibit the inhibitor, what's actually happening? Excitation. Okay? So striatum inhibits globus pallidus inhibits thalamus, okay? And then the thalamus will then activate the supplementary motor area, the motor areas in the brain. Okay, VA, VL is just ventroanterior, ventrolateral nuclei, which are involved with motor movements. Forget that, doesn't make sense right now. So GABA on GABA, disinhibition, and then the thalamus will then basically activate the motor area, and that causes a movement. So if you can read up here what I've said, basically, this here says direct, basically the direct pathway. You guys can't even see my face. Direct drives motor cortex. Direct D drives, the DD, direct drives the motor cortex, meaning it promotes movements. Okay, the direct pathway always involved with promoting movements. Okay, all right, let's come on to the indirect pathway. Okay, so here is the indirect pathway. It's going that way. Okay, remember that. Striatum again releases GABA, as it does. When it releases GABA onto the globus pallidus, so the globus pallidus was inhibiting the subthalamic nuclei. When we release GABA, we inhibit the inhibitor, which is the globus pallidus. So it inhibits the globus pallidus inhibits the subthalamic nuclei, right, normally. But now when you inhibit the inhibitor, the subthalamic nuclei are free. When they're free, they release glutamate. What does glutamate do? Glutamate, we said, was an excitatory neurotransmitter. So when you excite the globus pallidus, what's he going to do? What's the little globus pallidus going to do? The globus pallidus is going to then release GABA. GABA will then cause inhibition of the thalamus, therefore inhibiting the supplementary motor area, causing inhibition. Okay? So one more time, if we think about it like this, that the globus pallidus is a very bad, evil villain, and he likes to inhibit your motor movements. So if we can inhibit the globus pallidus, we can maybe cause some movements. So striatum will release GABA to inhibit the globus pallidus, which is the overall evil inhibitor. Once you inhibit the inhibitor, also disinhibition, you cause movements, because now if you inhibit the globus pallidus, it's not allowed to release this GABA that was inhibiting the thalamus. Thalamus is now free, thalamus excitates the supplementary motor area, therefore causing movements. Now what happens in striatum? In striatum you release GABA, which inhibits the globus pallidus. Okay? Now normally the globus pallidus is an inhibitor, but we've inhibited the inhibitor, disinhibition. The globus pallidus can no longer release this GABA, it cannot release this GABA, subthalamic nucleus are now free, they are excited, they release excitatory glutamate, which again activates the evil globus pallidus. Globus pallidus is activated, he wants to stop your movements, so he will release GABA. On releasing GABA, you will inhibit the thalamus, and when you inhibit the thalamus, you cannot excite the supplementary motor area not excited, and then therefore no movements. Okay, and over here, if you can see this over here says the indirect inhibits movement. Okay, so if we do DD and II, direct drives movement, meaning promotes, and indirect inhibits movement, meaning the indirect pathway stops movement. Okay, take a look at these videos. I'm going to try and make them always short, under 10 minutes, hopefully, inshallah. And what that's going to do is you're going to be able to watch them at least twice, and then these concepts will become clear. I hope I explained this well. I kept using the word inhibition. My knees are starting to kill me now. Okay, and let's just quickly talk about dopamine and acetylcholine at the end. Okay, so remember the glutamate and the GABA, those are the main ones, but these come after. So if you can just quickly see here, forget really what this substantia nigra, actually basically the substantia nigra is in the midbrain, and it releases dopamine, which will activate the striatum. Okay, and in doing so, in activating the striatum, it's activating the direct pathway. Okay, so just remember D, D, and D. Direct drives and it uses dopamine. Well, it doesn't use dopamine, but dopamine basically enhances or betters your motor initiation. Okay, so when we use dopamine in the direct pathway, we are causing, we're basically enhancing the movements. Okay, so D, 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 direct drives, enhances with dopamine. Okay, Dopamine comes from the substantia nigra, activates the striatum, but mainly just remember that the direct pathway uses dopamine to enhance motor movements, okay? And then obviously when we don't have dopamine levels, there's a certain disease, hint, it's Parkinson's, which obviously we see with bradykinesia, and we'll talk about that maybe in another video, about the diseases of the basal ganglia, okay? And here we have, what does this say? Acetylcholine down here, because the indirect inhibits movement and it uses this acetylcholine. Don't really remember, just forget about the striatum part. Just remember that the indirect pathway has acetylcholine in it, and acetylcholine likes to inhibit your movements. Okay, so I think I've explained pretty much everything on the board. Hopefully, I know I'm in an awkward position of where I'm sitting and everything. Hopefully these videos will get better, but obviously this is the first one, isn't it? So inshallah, I really hope I've explained this pretty well. Yeah, I guess the next part will be to do with when we have too little dopamine, Parkinson's, and some other disease with the basal ganglia pathways, Huntington's and whatsoever, okay? So that should be part 2 of this video. So I hope you guys have enjoyed these type of videos. Let's see where we can get with these, and like, comment, subscribe, share the videos as well. It's a new idea. And I hope you guys enjoyed it and understood, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.